hopefully. It
Oh,
works.
you're close up there. Awesome.
We're recording. So Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to. Thank you. My name is Kelly Kortum. I have lived in Bozeman for half my life now, about 18 years. I grew up in eastern Montana in Ekalaka. I lived the other half of my life there. It's a much different place than here. It's the second reddest county in the state. Uh, so I have had quite a Montana experience here and there and many places in between for work. I really value my experiences growing up. Not only the Eastern Montana hard work farm kind of experience, but the ability to talk to everyone, because you have to. You have to talk to everyone in town, and that's where I guess I got started talking to more diverse crowds. Well, depending on your definition of diverse. I came to Bozeman in '03 for school. I graduated with a degree in computer science in '08, and I worked a few odd jobs and ended up at the co-op in 2010. And I'm currently still working at the co-op as a systems administrator. I'm very passionate about IT policy, so I'm hoping to bring that to the legislature, a little bit more technical knowledge to help them better make laws, because a lot of the folks in the legislature grew up in a very different era. And just part of making representative government is having younger folks with the new experiences. And that's something I'm going to push as well in my campaigning is, hey, young people, get involved. You're just as much of a resident of this state as all the people in the legislature, so make your voice heard. My legislative interests right now are, of course, I will be a strong supporter of the general Democratic agenda of protecting public schools, public lands, and improving our healthcare system. But my niche issues where I think I can really add to the legislature are voting rights and technology. Hopefully some of the specifically addressing the issue of rural broadband. I'm very passionate about that. I grew up in a place where the phone called the internet company and a picture took 2 minutes to load. Other places, education systems were light years ahead of ours with just the fast internet connection. So I think getting access to everyone in Montana, especially during this pandemic, is going to be very important. That's just kind of my overview. I'd love to hear any of your questions on policy, campaigning, the legislature, voting rights. Just a general conversational tone here. So feel free to jump in when you like. Do you have any notes, Allison?
I do not right now. I'm trying to help someone get in. So apologies if I'm a little distracted at the moment.
Thank you for doing that.
Kelly, I have a question. When you say voting rights, what do you see as the barriers to voting in this state? Would it be the cost of having to mail a ballot, or would it be the inaccessibility of polling places, or would it be that there's not enough information that's disseminated about the candidates and their positions?
Thank you, Brian. All those things and more things. I did very recently put out a post that the legislature should approve postage paid ballots permanently. It'll increase turnout. It shouldn't cost you anything to vote. It's your right and your civic duty. So why does it cost us money to do so? So that's one good starting point. Another thing I'm really interested in is changing the name of mail ballot or absentee ballots to mail ballots. It's just more honest, and it eliminates the confusion of new residents who might have moved from a state where you have to have an excuse to request to vote by mail, whereas in Montana, it's your right. Everybody who's registered to vote can vote by mail. Another portion. Oh, Julia, please.
I just wanted to ask, so during COVID, there's an agreement now that everyone receives the mail-in ballot, yes? And that will be true in November?
The County Clerks Association and all the county clerks have requested that of Governor Bullock. I'm expecting him to make the same choice he did in the primary and allow the counties to choose whether to do an all-mail ballot or not.
And then going forward in the legislature, that's a pretty big issue, whether mail-in ballots could be made universal in Montana. Isn't that a pretty hard-fought, not likely to succeed issue?
It depends. Mail ballots in Montana have bipartisan support. A lot of Republicans vote by mail, as well as Democrats. So my very conservative votes by mail. So I think we could probably make some headway there. I think the biggest pushback would be from like the political apparatus of the GOP. You'd get a lot less pushback from the actual citizens of Montana because they just want to vote. As we're talking about voting process, there is another part we have to shore up along with mail ballots, and that is access to the vote on the reservations. A lot of times mail ballots don't reach the intended target on the reservations, and the turnout rate's much lower. So there are efforts and already some legislation to address that, but we have to be very sensitive of that when we're writing a law that affects all Montanans and their access to the voting box, the ballot box rather. Brian mentioned access to polling places. It's not super relevant right now because I expect we'll all be voting by mail in this election, but in past elections we have had concerns about the county commission shutting down some voting sites that would make voting really inconvenient for certain populations. For example, I believe this happened in maybe 16 or 14 at the university, that would force all the university folks out to down a dangerous road to vote at the Lutheran Church. That was a political move, and I'm glad we got that resolved. But again, in this election, voting by mail, I think most of Gallatin County's residents will have the ideal way of researching their candidate and making the best choice they can.
Kelly, I'm wondering if there will be collection boxes that the county clerk, has in various locations, particularly in the cities, to get around possible delays with the postal system service.
Just about, will they be there?
What other options are there if we're concerned about the postal service being slow to to deliver ballots? I know that where I lived before in Seattle, there would be right next to physical mailboxes that would be ballot collection boxes. So for people that didn't trust the post office to get their ballots delivered, they would have another option to drop off their ballot in a convenient way.
That's a good point, and we know there's some problems at the post office right now, and it seems to be politically motivated. I know there's always the ballot drop-off box at the courthouse in the week, maybe 2 weeks leading up to the election. And I believe in the past, I don't know if this counts for COVID era or not, but the polling places are open. Even if you receive your ballot in the mail, you can fill it out and take it into your polling place and drop it off. And there's several polling places around Gallatin County where that's an option. So if you want to be assured that your ballot is received, you can drop it right in the box there that goes straight to the elections office. Please, Terry.
Well, in the future, I mean, I know it won't get done for this November election, but if we do have an all-mail in election, then it seems like we'll be set up to try for that in the future. And I know in other cities like Portland or Seattle, they actually have, as Brian was describing, like little mail ballot, boxes like a mailbox that you can drop off, and they're everywhere, like at the museums, at the post offices, just various places around town. And it's super easy to just walk up and put your ballot in that box, and then the post office, is not involved, and you don't have to worry about, are they going to fund them or let them work overtime and all the terrible things that they're trying to do to keep us from voting.
That is a great idea. I know Portland, Oregon in general has all mail ballot elections and automatic voter registration. So they have eliminated a lot of the barriers in place to cast your vote. And I expect that infrastructure was something they learned as they went along, learning that process. And the bonus here is we can look at states like Oregon and say, hey, they found out how to do it the right way, efficiently, and they've made all the mistakes already, so we don't have to.
I can tell you Washington State was all mail-in ballot, and one thing they did, I don't know how many elections, maybe 1 or 2 election cycles, was postage paid ballots, because they found particularly in reservations there was a low turnout, just because, where do you get a stamp?
Sure. And I've also heard there's some problems with addresses. Just that kind of infrastructure on the reservations that make it hard to deliver mail as well, so they could receive their ballot very late. Any other voting questions while we're on it? I had maybe another note, another potential piece of legislation here. Let me go back and look. And this is going to be true of this year. There's always confusion over when is the last day you can mail your ballot and have it received. And that varies every year. And it's always a recommendation by the county. It's never a guarantee on the ballot. How nice would it be to say you must mail this by X day to have it count in the election, or even just the recommendation on the ballot that says we recommend you send this with at least 2 weeks time to get in because of COVID related concerns or something like that. So having that language on the ballot, I think, would help a lot as well. There's just as a member of the Gallatin Dems Executive Committee, we spend the last month of every election just explaining all the nuances of voting to people. There's just no public knowledge on it. And if it was more straightforward in the instructions, we could be campaigning, and everybody else that's asking the questions could be living their lives. So I think there's a lot of simplifying we can do that just hasn't been done because of political strategizing.
I just wanted to say that, before I lived in Montana, I lived in New York State, which is actually much more regressive than Montana in its voting procedures. And something so great in Montana is that when you do mail it in, you can check and see if it's been received. And I think that's a good thing to sort of talk up to if one's doing phone banking or whatever, that get it in. You can even check online that it's been received,
That's a very good point.
I think it's kind of a good system in Montana.
It adds that accountability to the process that you can look and make sure your ballot is received. It's so comforting to know that it made it through the mail, or dropping it off on election day was a good choice. And waiting, I have some opponents of mail voting that say turn in your ballot at the absolute last second because some candidate might say tackle a reporter or something and you'll want to change your vote. While that's reasonable advice, not everybody has all the time in the world to, or the time on that particular day to deliver your ballot at the last second. So I find most of the judgments of mail voting to be pretty special cases, I guess.
What other questions do you have? Maybe Terry, do you have a question for Kelly? Since we've got 3 actual voters for Kelly, so that's pretty exciting. Our future constituents.
I guess some things that I care about. I mean, and I don't have. I mean, I don't have any children in Montana or anything like that, or grandchildren. But I really care. I'm pretty passionate about pre-K. I'd like to have that happen, and I'm also, hope that the legislature will focus on infrastructure again and try to do something so that everyone around Montana gets their fair share and is able to correct some of the terrible infrastructure problems that exist in the state. And I don't know if the legislature can do anything about, I guess they could, a living wage.
We can. They certainly can. Let's see,
Yeah,
Robert,
beg your pardon?
1 second. I got a pre-K question, infrastructure,
Yeah.
and minimum wage. I just want to write them down so I go in order here.
Okay, and I'll stop with that.
Well, thank you. Those are great. Pre-K was on the table last session. Didn't end up getting passed again. I think there was some concern over how it would be administered, whether it would be a private-public partnership or entirely public pre-K. But I know Montana's behind on pre-K education in general. I think some of the problem, I think there is funding for it at the federal level that we have to, as a state, admit that we could use. Some folks in the legislature are no taxes and no public funding of anything, including federal level, even though, that's the clear solution, and it's the rest of the country funding all of its citizens. It's kind of how it's supposed to work with taxes and your civic duty to help support the people around you. My only strategy on that one, besides pushing for it, would be to try and talk my fellow legislators into accepting all the federal funding and match funding that they possibly can. On infrastructure, I get to hear the worst stories from the legislators over the last couple of years on infrastructure, and it's always a bargaining chip, depending on which town it's in. Shouldn't be hard. You can prioritize infrastructure in the order that it affects people's lives. For example, water and sewer is really important. It was used as a bargaining chip in previous sessions, especially in small towns. MSU is growing out of control, and they're always short on space at MSU. So it took, I think 3 or 4 sessions to get the Romney Hall expansion passed. And that was really important to residents of Bozeman and people who were stuffed into tiny classrooms because there wasn't enough teaching space on campus. Infrastructure is a no-brainer, and it always pays us back over time. So yes, whatever we can do for improving our infrastructure, our road system, sewage, water, quality of life improvements. We deserve it because we always live here. A bit on infrastructure, minimum wage. This is really interesting to me. I was looking at the cost of living per state. In the average in Montana, the average minimum wage to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, or the average wage required to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in average Montana is $14 an hour. Our current minimum wage is half that. So I hear the arguments from some that Ecolak is not the same as Bozeman in terms of cost of living, and I get that. You can buy a house in eastern Montana in many places for $20,000 or $30,000, whereas here the same house goes for $300,000, $400,000. It's just everybody wants to live in Bozeman, in the mountains. Those small towns are not growing in population, so there is a little bit of discrepancy there. Now, does that mean that $7 an hour cuts it in Eastern Montana when you're trying to feed your family? No. Minimum wage is much lower, and it hasn't kept up with productivity like it did pre-1980. So I just learned the sponsor of the minimum wage increase legislation in Helena, and I really like the sponsor, and I'm hoping to work with her to add some Bozeman flavor to the conversation, I guess. I think that's Marianne Dunwell in Helena. And I'm really looking forward to working with her on this because she's tried several times, and the legislature is hostile to anything like that for jobs and business reasons. So I just kind of ranted through your list of three. Do you have any questions as I went through them?
No, I think it sounds like you're on the same wavelength. So yeah, I'm pleased. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Hi, we've been joined by Robert. How are you, Robert?
Sorry I'm late. Hello.
No, welcome.
I feel bad coming in late, so I'll be quiet, which if Julia knows me for sure, she's like, that's an amazing thing if I be quiet for a minute.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. I'm just it's a small group. We're doing just kind of casual conversational Q&A thing here. So if you have any questions for me regarding policy or elections or anything that I end up ranting on, I welcome your questions.
Yeah, Kelly, which is one thing I want to follow up on the minimum wage. You know, what's always interesting is where you have, you know, a metro area that spans that extends across a state line, and when you look at minimum wage comparison between two states, and you know, that's a good way to test. You know, what you would expect, you know, if the minimum wage went up in one state, well, you know, businesses would go across the state line. So a good place to where that has been tested is, you know, Spokane, Coeur d'Alene area, since the minimum wage in Washington state was increased, and there just isn't the evidence that, you know, people go across the state line, even in some places across the street, if the state line happens to run right through a metro area. So that it's a little harder to test in Montana. I can't think of any place, you know, in this state that you know, that crosses a state line, but where it's been done, where it's been looked at elsewhere, there just isn't evidence that it makes the state any less competitive.
There's always one or two examples of a business that made a deal out of it and moved, but I agree that the general sentiment is, or in the data show that businesses aren't abandoning Washington state just because their employees get paid quite a bit more, actually. There's one town in eastern Montana on the border of North Dakota and Montana, Fairfield, that's on the state line, but I doubt it'd be a good study of this, as I think there's like less than 300 people there. That's the only one I could think of in Montana.
Kelly, can I ask, because as you talk, I'm realizing that you actually are very knowledgeable about the legislature and recent things there. And I'm always struck by how little most of us know about the state legislature. And, but by the way, I do want to introduce Rob because he does live in District 65 and he knows a lot of people. So he's an important future constituent. So I'm so interested to hear how things seem to be shifting, that like this coalition of growing Bozeman and Missoula, that and getting more Democrats into, even if you're still a minority, that there's a kind of growing coalition. Can you speak to that? What you sense is happening in the legislature now?
There's an election for governor this year, so concerns over balance in the various seats of power in Helena has come up and is on everybody's mind right now, right and left and independent. Montana always prides itself on being a purple state, blue governor, red legislature. balance and separation of powers, and that's healthy. If we end up with a red governor, the balance in the legislature is way more important. It means we'll have to fight harder in the legislature to stop bad laws and enact good ones, and make the good laws such that our governor, our slightly more hostile governor, wouldn't be able to veto them. They'd be too well written of a law. So that is a huge concern right now. And that's why you'll see our local efforts here from the Gallatin Dems to flip a seat or two here in the county, is to help our allies in Helena and our allies here in Gallatin County that go to the legislature. I'm really excited about a couple of races here for that reason. We could be the leader. I think we were one of the only districts in the state in 2018 that did flip a seat with Pat Flowers in SD 32. We are more and more relied upon to, as one of the growing populations in Montana, to provide good, thoughtful legislators, and I'm glad that we have our committee working so hard to do that here. Do you have any follow-ups about makeup or coalitions? I'm sure you heard about the Solutions Caucus last time.
No, I'd be interested to hear about that.
Okay, sure. Because the legislature was not overwhelmingly Republican, but quite unbalanced, somewhat. Some of the more the less extreme Republicans that still wanted to, make sure Montana citizens could survive an illness without going bankrupt, that sort of thing. A coalition was formed between the Democrats and some of those, I think that referred to sometimes as reasonable Republicans, which formed a coalition to expand Medicaid, for example. That was the crowning achievement of the last three legislators, were ensuring that I think 80,000 to 100,000 more Montanans had health coverage, which is good for all of us. It improves the health of our communities. It makes us more happy and responsible citizens. That's just good policy. And a lot of that funding came from federal, which was federal funding and federal matching. And a lot of money comes into the state because of Medicaid expansion. So that's just one example of how you can even work across the aisle with people to accomplish big goals like that. And it helps us all. To your point on not knowing what's going on in the legislature, that's bothered me for years. In 2017 session, my spouse and I signed up for a whole bunch of newsletters from every nonprofit possible. And they send us an email about a bill they cared about. And then my wife collated them and sent out a weekly update, like, oh, these are all the bills that probably matter to you as progressives in Bozeman. That was a volunteer service, and you cannot rely on volunteer service to inform about these very important topics, because we all have very busy lives, from families to take care of, work obligations. So I would like to improve the infrastructure at which we inform the citizens about upcoming bills and engaging them in that way, getting them to Helena to give their testimony on bills coming up, calling heads of committee to express their interest or disinterest with a certain law or bill. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but one tool I found really helpful while Amanda Curtis was in the legislature is she'd have a daily update on YouTube that only took 3 or 4 minutes to consume, and it kind of filled you in on what the legislature was up to. I would like somebody to do that. I'm not sure I will be able to, in my first session when I'm cramming super hard, be able to learn and, at the end of a very exhausting day, translate the legislator speak into a 3 or 4 minute YouTube video. But that is a goal at some point. I'd also like to find a way for the legislative staff to somehow get the word out there in a more, neutral, nonpartisan way. But to really be involved in the legislature requires lots of practice, learning how to read the bills, and then interpreting what the newspaper says about a bill or a certain legislator. It's just exhausting. And I think we could be much more transparent and open about it. One other problem is we have one session every 2 years, and it lasts 3 months. So we have to pack 2 years of business into 3 months. It's really hard to do that and share what we're up to at the time, or share what they're up to at the time. We babysit. Thanks, and I will make a strong effort to not only inform people myself when I'm elected, but encourage my allies to as well. It's important that we keep the folks at home not only informed, but fighting, because testimony matters. Phone calls matter to the legislature. There are stories of legislators getting a stack of notifications that somebody called, that all these people were against a bill, and they reconsidered it in committee. That's people power, and it's beautiful, and it can't happen unless we're really open about what's going on. Thanks for your question. Please, Bruce.
Kelly, this is kind of a follow-up question to Julia's question, your answer. It may be the case this year that we are in a disruptive and opportunistic pivot point in history, driven by the virus, COVID-19, and the economic free fall right now that we're in as a nation, and that is impacting and will impacting us in Montana. I also wonder, I think of FDR in 1932, a pivot point in which politically around the country, ideology receded and empathy politics claimed the day, actually the decade, because of that. What is your sense of how this pivot point that we're facing right now here locally and in Montana, in this, ideological politics or empathy politics, phrases I'm using, how might this play out, this unusual time next year? It's a big question, I know, but things are going to be different.
Yes, we are living right now. This is probably the most uncertain time since the Cold War. It's impossible to predict how bad it will get, but as a state government, we can mitigate our risk factors and make sure we're prepared for tougher times by writing good legislation that improves the stability of our local food infrastructure, our transportation, our state government, our healthcare systems. And that all starts with citizens being elected to the legislature and thinking about local problems in a way that they can, shore up the dam, or whatever the sandbags. I'm forgetting the metaphor I'm going for here, but at the state level, we can improve systems like that improve stability. I like state laws that encourage local businesses, farmers market type, single owner businesses. I think those improve the stability of a region because, as we saw during the initial COVID lockdown, a lot of meat packing plants got shut down, which affected the supply line for meat. What if we had a whole bunch of local meatpacking businesses here in Montana, right where the beef is grown anyway, instead of having it shipped from the Midwest here? That's just one little infrastructure change we could write laws for and change at this level that would improve the stability of our local economy, so we didn't get hit quite as hard in the bad times. We might be right at the precipice of a bad time right now. Based on the data that came out today, it really looks like it. So we should be planning ahead to take care of ourselves and our neighbors, and then encourage that behavior across the nation. Were you looking for more specifics or more philosophical on that one?
Well, somewhat specifics. As a follow-up, I do wonder, and you mentioned the Solutions Caucus, which I'm familiar with, might there be new opportunities to move forward progressively with empathy in Montana politics, and perhaps even some of the Solutions Caucus may be willing to move further to the left as a part of this.
Maybe. I think when you write reasonable policy that nobody can disagree with, if it happens to be slightly more moderate or left, if nobody disagrees with it, it becomes law. As far as pulling other people, I think there are a good block of moderates in the legislature that will agree to good policy. I think the starting point there is having a good relationship between legislators and agreeing on values. We all agree that we want our neighbors to be happy and healthy and smart, educated, and have all those opportunities that we have. That's a good starting point, and I doubt many people in the legislature could disagree with that one. So, yeah, it's a long process, and I'm just starting that portion of it. And without being in the legislature, I can't really speak too strongly on that, but just my study of it for the last 5 years has kind of given me an opportunity to see a little hope there, I guess.
I think it's certainly going to be a very important session next year with all this going on, in important ways that it's not been before, perhaps. Because of what maybe all of us on this Zoom call aren't terribly impacted financially, perhaps, by the virus, but boy, a lot of Montanans are being impacted and will be impacted. And there will be opportunities perhaps we've not had before.
To move legislation,
right?
Some emergency safety type.
So safety net type stuff. Yeah.
Thinking a little bit longer or bigger and bolder here. You mentioned FDR earlier. If you didn't, Brian did.
I did.
Thank you. Green New Deal was a very strong response to a major crisis. And
right.
It paid off for decades.
Yes.
It was money invested in the American people, and we're still utilizing ideas and infrastructure that was built during that era to
right.
make our country more stable. And I think if it gets bad enough, there will be more political willingness to do something like that again. I'm hopeful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Can you kind of speak along those lines about, if there is some opportunity for new legislation that would provide safety nets in this really uncertain economy that is here already, but some of us aren't feeling yet, but some of us are. Like, can you speak to how your experience and who you are will help bridge that divide between the less progressive legislators and you being, the progressive that you are, and how you work with people who maybe don't quite see that yet, but you can help, can you help them get there?
I'm certain I can talk through these problems with a significant portion of the legislature. My style is conversational. I like what we're doing right now. I like having one-on-ones over coffee with people to discuss a problem and pragmatic, practical solutions that we can make right now. Once you build a reputation as a problem solver and not a kind of a political partisan fella, I think that reputation will build on itself, and hopefully you can do some greater things with it as you get more experience and more knowledge of how the inner workings work. As I guess from the who I am angle, I'm thinking about my peer group right now, and a lot of people I went to school with, and a lot of people I work with work in the tourism industry, which is definitely impacted by the COVID thing. I'm not I'm very lucky to have the job and the stability I have, but not everybody has that. And as the economic impacts of this like filter out into the community, we're going to see more and more people that will need not only support from their fellow person, but from the government, from the structure around them. I just keep coming back to that. We are living through history right now, and I'm not sure that's appreciated by the entire population as much as it should be, because we're all living our daily lives and just trying to get through that. It's really hard to reflect on the size of the problems that we're faced with right now. I think a lot about system builders, people that design structures that affect everyone. The people that originally set up the electrical grid and how it worked, and how people in different circumstances still made that work. The example I'm thinking of here is electrical co-ops in rural areas. It's not profitable to run power lines out to a single ranch out in the middle of nowhere. But we all recognized back in the 10s and 20s, 1930s, that power was a critical quality of life improvement for everyone. So people in these rural communities where the profitable corporations wouldn't go formed electrical co-ops and made sure that everybody had access to power. Structures like that really interest me. And I know we're in a time right now where everyone, regardless of partisanship, can probably agree on the need for some of those structures. And I think they can be applied outside of electrical and telecom and health. I think there's a lot of opportunity for cooperative business models that serve the entire community and make you more resilient. It's kind of a weird direction to go, but that's where my mind's been lately, I guess.
That actually brings me to a question that kind of arises from, when you went through your education, your current job, and when you said promote technology in the legislature, I'm thinking of rural broadband. And could the electric co-op model of the 20s and 30s be relevant to high-speed internet, to bringing high-speed internet to rural communities, especially since this pandemic and remote learning has shown that, without access to broadband, it really penalizes people when schools are not physically available.
Thank you, Brian. That's actually, in my experience with the legislature, that's the one I got most in the weeds on as far as issues goes, rural broadband and access, and who's providing that access. I learned at Legislative Week this last January that telecom co-ops have put 10 times more fiber in the ground than for-profit corporations in Montana in the last 2 years. It's night and day difference. It's because of the corporations that need to make a profit needing an incentive, and the state of Montana not being able to afford that incentive, whereas the co-ops, some of them kind of operate a little bit like nonprofits, so they get a few breaks here and there, but really it's the community and the shareholders insisting that all of their neighbors get broadband, no matter if they're 100 miles away. We will all need access to the service. Because of the times we're living in right now, I am willing to bet that Republican legislators would be a lot more willing to work with all of us on ensuring we all get access to the internet to live through these disruptive events like the pandemic. I bet it's on everybody's mind, and I bet you we can make more progress on that, specifically on wire in the ground. And then there's the issue of funding. There was a national program, can't remember exactly what it was called, through the FCC that was recently overturned that assured that households that couldn't afford broadband there was like a subsidy to ensure that they could get the minimum level of internet to operate a business online. I think it was 10 megabits. I can't remember exactly what that program was called, but it was cut by the administration at the federal level at the FCC and replaced with a program that I think benefited private businesses more than being a program through the government. So yes, cost, accessibility, and redundancy is another thing in Montana that affects us. MSU 3 or 4, it might have been longer, but a few years ago, MSU lost their internet service for 10 days because a farmer drove a disc through the fiber optic line to Seattle. It was rough. The whole university cut off through one little incident. That we should have redundancies to Denver and Chicago to make sure that the internet is truly the network that it was built to be, and that we don't lose out on service and interrupt 10 days of our lives, especially if you're a student, to little mistakes like that. Again, all about thinking about improving stability, reliability, and safety right now. Thanks, Brian. Hi, Terry.
I'm going to go ahead and stop for now, but thank you.
I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, it's really good.
Thanks for being here, Terry.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Good
night. Robert, do you have any questions for Kelly? Anything that's on your mind?
Again, I tuned in way too late, and I maybe am pulling this out of context, but just since you're asking me, I tried to show my streetscape because there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on behind me on my front porch. Anyway, but it screws up. But when I first tuned in, I heard Kelly say MSU is growing out of control, and then, but it could have been, I'm taking that way out of context, etc. But if it's okay, if the spotlight's on me, I would ask the question of that portion of a sentence, where'd that come from, and what do you mean by that? So I apologize. It's not okay to tune in late.
Sure, no worries. It might have just been me kind of exaggerating a bit, but
sure.
We've had issues coming up with student housing on campus because of our growth rate. The popularity of our university and the programs there has driven up the amount of people attending MSU dramatically. And that not only affects MSU's bottom line and their facilities and their housing, but it affects the surrounding community as well, in parking and traffic. Just absorbing those extra thousands of people over the years has really stretched Bozeman's infrastructure. So it's impossible to plan for that kind of growth. I think they're catching up to it right now once the university realized like how fast this is all going and how fast Bozeman's growing around it, which also adds to the stress of it. So I guess if I said out of control, it was just to show you the magnitude of the growth.
Sure, and so just some context. I arrived here in '89, finished school at MSU, and I remember the university president at the time. I can't remember his name, but the T-Rex in front of the Museum of the Rockies is named after him. So it's Mike something or other. Anyway, but I remember there was a time when there was no money in the state, et cetera, and there was like, we're not expanding it, we're not building any new buildings. And I thought, and full disclosure, I'm an architect, but it was like, hold on a second, why would we not do anything? And there's a part of me that's like, MSU is clean industry. It allows us to have this great airport over here. It brings tons of smart people in. So I hear the mantra on occasion that they're out of control. They've built over 1,000 beds in all their dorms recently, which pulled everyone out of unsafe, or not everyone, but pulled many kids out of unsafe, weird basement situations. I think there's a lot of good up at MSU, and if they, and I went to school 2 years in Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm from, 2 years in Minneapolis on the way here, and 4 years here. So I always say I went 4 years to big schools, 4 years to small schools, and I prefer the big schools because it's just there's that much more great things going on. So to me, if MSU wants to grow to 20, that's fine. It's everyone's responsibility to provide housing, and the market takes care of things and usually or catches up, et cetera. But anyway, so again, I apologize for tuning in late. I just heard that, and I thought, God, with this small group, I'm going to get called on. Brain kept saying, I'm going to bring that up. But anyway, I thank you for your this time. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I am very proud of our university. The story I tell is I came up here for an agriculture mechanics competition when I was a sophomore in high school, and I just looked at the mountain and went to the university and like, this is where I belong. This is where I'm moving forever. And so far that's been true. I plan on keeping that true. The university and the culture around it is why I chose this place. From the small town, like this was the big city and this is where everything was going on, yet everybody still behaved like, you know, a neighbor. And that was something I really valued from where I grew up. So I guess that's, MSU was the main reason I chose this place to live.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So it is almost 9 o'clock, so we've been on here for an hour. Is there any other pressing question or thought or concern that anyone wants to share?
And if you can't think of it right now, we'll be doing this again, at least monthly, would you say, Allison?
Yeah, I think that maybe once a month. I think we'll start opening it up a little bit more. We've kind of been experimenting a little bit with this, and so we'll definitely have at least a few more with Kelly and hopefully with some other local candidates as well doing this. Like I said, we have recorded it, so we will post this on our website. So that if you have anyone else in your neighborhood that's interested in, you know, hearing a little bit more, learning about Kelly and watching this conversation, that'd be great to share. I am going to share my screen really quickly just to let you all see some of the new things on our website that we've got. We have a election day countdown now, which is super fun. We're also going to be highlighting a candidate every couple weeks. And so we started with Kelly since we're, you know, having conversations with him right now. And then the most important thing is if you have questions about another candidate or you're just, you know, interested to see connecting with them on their social media or their website, we have a list of all the Democratic candidates in Gallatin County. Basically every Democrat who's on the ballot here is listed on this website, and you can check them out, learn a little bit more about what they're running for, what their qualifications are. And then if we have an email and a website, that'll be linked on here. And you can also check them out on social media. Social media is kind of a low-hanging fruit for candidates to get followers and have engagement. So if you're on social, please follow your candidates and support them in that way and share their message out. Candidates definitely, we're all creating new ways to reach constituents and voters right now. So that's just what we're working on. But I really appreciate all of you being on here and having this conversation. And Kelly, thanks for being in the hot seat once again. We really appreciate your candidacy and look forward to electing you in November.
Thank you so much for having me tonight and facilitating this, Allison.
Yeah.
Thank you all for showing up, and it's great to see you, and see you out there. Good night.
Yeah. All right. Take care.